fall garden checklist. So it's fall now, temperatures are starting to drop, not really the prime time for gardening anymore. There are a few things you can still enjoy gardening, if they have a very quick maturation time. But if you're really done with planting, you're not planting anything else for your garden this year, it's time to kind of go through the steps of preparing your garden for next year, for spring. So the first thing that is really important to do is clean out the beds. So most likely, most of your plants are dying or dead already, and instead of letting just them kind of sit around, their carcasses sitting around, dig them out, put them in your compost bin, make sure the beds are clean and prepped, kind of like a workstation, just clean and all that. So there's no debris that you're going to run into in the spring, because that just takes away from the time you could be using to plant and seed and things like that. So if you don't want to waste any time, making sure your beds are clean ahead of time is a really good thing to do. Make sure you remove all the roots, the weeds, dead plants, things like that. And of course, in the same vein, make sure all your tools and accessories are put away as well. If you have labels for each bed or tools laying around, put those away, put those in your garden shed, and store them for the winter so you can use them in the spring again. Now, once your bed is completely, cleaned up, there's no leaves sitting around, there's nothing in the way, then add a few layers, a few inches of compost. Now, a lot of people might wonder, why would you add compost during the fall if it's just going to sit over winter and then you go into the spring? Why wouldn't you add that compost in the spring? Well, the benefit of doing it in the fall is that it's exactly what you want to let that compost sit over the winter, because naturally the compost is going to continue to break down, fall and drain into the rest of the soil and amend that soil, give it more nutrients, so that when the spring comes, it will be super nutritious and you won't really need to add hardly any compost, if any at all, because the soil will already have all the nutrition it needs. There's also no need to till in the compost when you add it, because again, just the natural process of, you have this compost layer, it's gonna rain, it's gonna snow, the snow's gonna melt, all that's gonna drain down into the soil that you already have, so tilling is not necessary. Now, if you really want to make sure that your soil is in the best shape of its life for the spring, for the fall right now, a really good thing to do is plant some cover crops. So cover crops are like clover, peas, alfalfa, whatever you want basically, because those cover crops naturally improve the soil. They balance the pH, the minerals, so it's really great to do. But besides that, once the plants die, you can mix them into the soil, and as they break down, that will further improve the soil. So you kind of got this live compost going on within the bed itself. But it's best to start turning them over into the soil once spring comes, because by that time they'll be pretty broken down and ready to be further immersed into the soil. Fall is also a really good time to start thinking about what kind of gardening projects you want to do for next year, because maybe you want to add a new garden bed, maybe you want to expand your current garden bed, or maybe you want to move something, whatever these projects are, fall is the perfect time to do it before the snow starts falling and gets in the way. So basically take this time, this is like your free time for your garden, all of your kind of projects that you want to work on. It's a great time for that. You can build new garden beds, you can again move your current beds, basically whatever you want. So again, use this time to kind of really flesh out and establish your current garden setup. Now, if you have specifically a perennial garden, there are a few extra tips you can look forward to. For example, planting some bulbs at this time is important. Planting bulbs is great because putting them deep in the soil, that kind of protects them from the cold that's going to come in winter. And of course, once the spring comes again, they'll be fine. They'll just shoot right up. Then also you have to be careful with the mulch that you add. It's always good to add a few inches of mulch over your perennial garden beds and make sure they're protected and they have that organic matter to nourish them. And of course, pull out any weeds, common nuisances that might be in your garden. And most importantly, it's still important to continue watering your perennial plants even in the fall. So usually most perennial plants in the fall, they're dormant, they're not really growing or doing anything anymore. But that doesn't account for the roots. Their roots are still growing even in the autumn. So in order to make sure that they still have, moisture and nutrients, it's important to continue watering them about once a week or so, as usual. Depending on where you are during autumn, it might be more of a rainy season. So obviously if it starts raining more and more often, you won't have to do much watering for your garden. So just keep track of how often it's raining versus how often you manually have to water your garden. Make sure you get rid of any diseased plants because sometimes once it gets cold, some plants might develop a disease or something, and that could easily spread to other plants. So if you find that something is diseased or not doing well or dying, you might as well just remove it now, and you have a nice new split, and you have a nice new space to add something for next year. So those are my main tips for having a nice fall garden checklist, and hopefully this can help you make sure that your garden is in tip-top shape once the new year rolls around. If you found this video helpful, of course you can leave a like and maybe subscribe, and if you have any questions you can leave those down in the comment section down below. I also make a few videos throughout the week, so don't miss those.